Hey, Pat and Doug back with another episode of the Wealthy Fitness Entrepreneur. And we're going to go ahead and take this one a little bit of a different direction. And instead of talking about a singular topic, Doug and I have this opportunity to work with businesses at different stages. We have our boardroom group and some private clients that we work with that are more advanced, more seasoned business owners. And then we work with some people who are at earlier stages of business, maybe haven't kind of fully turned the corner to having what I'd call their ideal business or something like that. And so I think we want to spend a little bit of time in this episode talking about the differences between the two. Where are those more advanced, more successful businesses different from the average businesses in our industry? That way, if you see gaps in what you're doing, it gives you an opportunity to improve. If you're not quite to that stage you want to be, it can be an aspirational thing that you can say, okay, here's how I can close those gaps. So we'll just start to unpack these things one by one. So Doug, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about the differences between the kind of average business owner and the great business owners in our industry?
Yeah, I would say if we start at the top with marketing, right? We know marketing is always going to be part of any business. And I think the approach and the mindset of the advanced business owner, the more seasoned business owner, is that we're always marketing. We're always marketing. It's a 365 thing, and it's planned out and it's consistent. It's not this, I'm going to go shoot and try to get 100 clients tomorrow. And it's also not this, oh, I'm desperate, I got to go now market, or I'm slow and I need to go market. So when we work with, the folks in boardroom, I try to really get them to, and they buy into it, work off of this monthly marketing plan where there's 12 months in a year and every month needs its plan. And we're going to execute the plan. And that generally smooths out a lot of what we see in the industry, right? If we look at growth trajectory of the average training gym, it's like we start off strong and then we get busy and it stresses our operations. And so we get busy and we stop marketing. And what happens when we stop marketing is the pipeline at the beginning stage slows down. And thus, there's not a lot of new people coming in. And at first that's okay. But the reality is every fitness business has churn. And I think the churn is much higher than most people realize. And so all of a sudden you wake up and you had 50 clients and now all of a sudden you have 40 and you're like, oh shoot, I got to market. And it takes time to build that pipeline. Not every lead prospect is ready to buy. That's why we always want people at every single stage. And so that's the first one I would start with is, the great business owners have a consistent marketing plan that's implemented month after month.
Really, the only thing I would even add to it is, I think one of the things that I enjoy most about the clients that we work with and kind of the historical track of the type of people I work with is it doesn't mean they're all the same, right? Like some people are really, really good at creating videos and being a face of their business and using that as a marketing outlet. Some people are great at local marketing, building relationships, strategic alliances, networking. Some people just pay to outsource it and have ads run as a piece of this. But I think that everybody has found something they can and will be consistent with, and it's always multifaceted too. I know that the marketing plan that you employed, kind of the framework that you shared with a lot of the owners we work with, there's an online advertising component to it. There's a local kind of strategic alliance, neighborhood-based marketing approach. There's a referral, a reactivation, a reconnection component. So it's always multifaceted. So you're never really just putting all your eggs in this one basket. And I think if you think about the consistency, the 365 approach to marketing, but then understand that that doesn't mean you have to just borrow somebody else's approach item by item. It just means that you need to be as consistent as they are. You probably need to have as many lines in the water that they have. You find out what works for you. I think we've seen that time and time again with the best business owners we've worked with.
For sure, for sure. The other one that I would add to this is, thinking about the people side of our business, right? And we're in the service business, whether you service online, offline, whether you service one on one, or like going back to your comment earlier, everybody's different in the sense of what model they run, where they run that model, how much we need to, like, what I needed to pay team members in Maine is different than what somebody in Manhattan needs to pay team members. At the end of the day, though, if we want to scale a fitness business, we're going to need team members. And so if we start with that approach, we may not be able to have team members right away. But if we start to carve out, a vision of what kind of team do we want, how many team members do we want? That's a big thing I talk about in our boardroom group, is the personality of the leader often drives the size of the team that you like to work with. And you are often, like, I thoroughly enjoyed having 10 team members. That was kind of my sweet spot. And Josh, who I sold the gym to, he's more of like a 5 or 6 guy, like he taps out there. So we tweaked the model to fit that. Right. Same thing with, like, there's large group people that love the large group and the energy of the large group. And then there's the small group side of it. That's a little bit more quieter and intimate. So having I think a plan, and it's by no means is it like set in stone, but having a plan in place for who you want on your team as far as the type of people, how many team members you do want, and, setting it up in a hiring and structure way that doesn't crush you so that you can scale. One of the mistakes that I know I made early on, and a lot of people make, is paying people in a structure such as a high percentage or a high per session, that really, in the beginning, it's favorable because you don't have to pay out until revenue comes in. But what we have to remember is we just sacrificed, in my opinion, the long-term win. We had a short-term win, which is our payroll's lower, or we don't have to pay out until we get income in. But long-term, we just said no to a good profitable gym because we're giving 70% of it to the trainer or something like that. So really thinking about how you're going to staff your gym, I think is something that the advanced owners think about.
So I actually have 4 that come to mind. Um, Tracking systems, money, and then the last one I'll have to probably give some context to, but it's thinking more like an investor. Um, Tracking, I think a lot of people that get into this industry kind of shy away from that side of it, whether it's, having, a scoreboard for their business, or just tracking simple metrics like leads and conversions and revenue, or attrition. It, but all the best business owners do it, right? I think some people, when they're unsuccessful, they kind of want to have that ostrich syndrome and kind of bury their head. But the tracking, I think, allows you to be, I think, more efficient and more effective, because you focus on doing the things that make a difference, that move the needle. So I think that, tracking what you're doing in your business and how the numbers are being affected by the actions that you're taking, I think, is critical. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that before I kind of shift into systems or not.
No, I mean, to maybe bring it down to like a tactical level, we would always do our tracking on a Friday, like end of week. Just have your rhythm. I think that's the key, broadly speaking, with all these best practices, is there's rhythm to them. And so, all the stuff you talked about with tracking, whether that's revenue or leads or, whatever it may be, have a rhythm for when you are going to track that, plan it so that it is, every Friday is our scoreboard review. We're going to recap the week, and that sets the tone for the following week.
So the next one up was systems. And I think it's obvious for people that have a bigger business that they understand the importance of systems. But even those successful small businesses that are just north of solopreneur, I think have historically always had really good systems because they're saying, "Hey, I figured out what works. So I want to replicate that as often as possible. And I want to create a documented way so that I'm always doing it at the highest level. Anybody else I hand it off to does it at the highest level." And we'll find people time and time again that kind of get stuck in neutral and they don't find time to create those systems. Everything kind of lives in their head and they kind of hope other people do things the right way in their eyes. They have expectations of team members that they're going to do things a certain way, but those people have never been provided a system or trained to execute a system. But all the best businesses have systems in place for essentially every facet of what they do.
Yeah. And the systems, they need to be, like I would always describe it as they need to come to life, right? Like they cannot be just a Google Doc. And frankly, nowadays, Google Docs may be one of I'm not going to say the last because we still use Google Docs, but there are other ways to document your systems, right? Loom videos. We would often, move things to like interactive checklists where they have to interact with the system. So like onboarding, perfect example. Onboarding a client, it's the same thing every single time, right? So that needs to be a system. However, think about the difference between putting on a Google Doc, which they're probably going to look at maybe once, maybe have it up as a tab, versus having an interactive sheet where they have to check the box that they did the thing for each client. It's the same system, but it's interactive. So it comes to life. It gets used more. So, making these systems come to life, I think is huge.
Yeah. And I will tell you the systems coming to life also kind of suggest to me that they're always evolving. I think I made the mistake early on, even in my baseball coaching career. I thought, man, well, I get this playbook that has the way that we do things documented. I'm in the clear, but it's always this living, breathing thing. You're always going to find ways to improve it, to evolve. And having written operations manuals for franchises, I mean, yeah, it's kind of like the Google Doc thing. If it just sits there, it's going to get ignored. You have to find a way that gets people to consume it. Now, we obviously operate in a world right now where video consumption's at an all-time high. So that, I mean, think about how people consume information and do that. We used in my first iteration of business a literal like manila folder with a checklist that you had to check off each step. That there are more sophisticated, um, more virtual ways to do that stuff now, but the premise is the same. Like, we have to facilitate the execution of things. So, and then the third that I see the best business owners do that maybe the ones who struggle or just don't get over the hump haven't haven't really fully embraced is they take a very proactive approach to their finances. Now, I know that you are a strong advocate of profit first, but I mean, I would tell you even before I knew what profit first was, you would see the difference, right? Like the struggling business owner, the business owner is kind of stuck. They were always kind of paying themselves last, reactive to whatever was happening. Um, Whereas the people that were doing better were always more proactive with their finances, whether it was automating money going in savings, whether it was paying themselves first. Um, but they took a very proactive approach and understood that the business in part was designed to create wealth for them. I mean, it's kind of the premise in some ways of this show as a whole is to use the business to help you build the life, the wealth, the impact that you want to have. And I think the best business owners figure that out. And many do employ that profit first or some iteration of it approach, but all of them, even if they don't use that verbatim, take a very proactive approach to their finances.
Yeah, I mean, really, if we boil it down, what did Profit First do? They took they built it into a manageable system. Speaking of systems, they built it into a manageable system that really played to, and Mike talks about it in the book, like you play to how we all run our finances, which is we log in and look at our bank account. Like for years and years and years, the finance world tried to get us to run off of, P&Ls and all this other stuff. But the reality is for a small business, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to look at my checking account and that's how I'm going to gauge, do I have money or not? And so it's a system to make sure that that bank account always looks low because the money has been transferred out to these other accounts. So, definitely a huge fan of the profit first model and hold the whole pay yourself first. The other thing that I would maybe add there is, paying attention to what categories, what percent you want for each category, because as you continue to scale your business, the percentage can stay the same, but we want to make sure that for example, I like to see a 25 to ideally 30% profit margin. And so I'm understanding that if I'm only making $10,000 a month, that means I'm only going to make $3,000 a month. And that's okay. That's a grind to get to $20,000, $30,000 a month, where now that 30% is much larger. But on the flip side of that, we can also have the negative, which is, I was working with a boardroom client just a couple weeks ago we woke up and looked at his payroll percentage and it's well over 50%. And so his top line has grown and he's grown really well, but all of a sudden higher, 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 which is great. A little bit more free time, but now profit margin actually shrank because payroll's high. So again, all problems that every business owner faces, whether we're talking about advanced or whatever, but if we can really set the tone to keep track of our finances, that, 30 to 40% goes to payroll, not 60%, right? Things like that, help keep us it keeps the business healthy so that we can really, at the end of the day, protect how much we're personally able to, generate or pull out of the business.
Yeah, and the last one that I think of, and this is maybe a little bit more complicated to explain, but it's thinking like the best business owners think like an investor. They don't think like a day trader or a check into cash person that's looking for some desperation, immediate gratification type of thing. They're saying, okay, how do I build things? I understand that things compound. If I'm hiring a team member, it's not because I'm in this desperation panic mode. It's because I want to grow. I want to scale. I know I'm going to have to invest in this person. If I, scaling the business, it's not just because top line revenue is this sexy number. It's because I'm trying to build something that helps me feed my ultimate goals as a business owner. And so I just think that mentality of kind of breaking away from that almost day trader or even worse, check into cash person, where it's like I'm willing to, like, the check into cash person I think of is like I'm willing to do something desperate to make a little bit of money now. And then the day trader is just always looking for immediate gratification and has no real foresight into where they're going. They don't think about compounding. They don't think about, am I building a durable business? Am I installing systems and habits that do compound over time? Um, so, so I think that kind of overarching approach or mentality is paramount in the best business owners I've seen.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, going back to systems for a second, systems won't change your revenue this month, right? And that's why I think, they from an operational standpoint, everybody thinks they need them. They know they need them, but it doesn't impact your revenue today. But what it does do is give you I love the word durable, give you a more durable business so that you are around multiple years from now, so that you do have more free time a year from now. And so just like an investor, I'm not necessarily looking for a return today. I'm looking to create future wealth down the road. And you can look at it in any category of our business. I mean, you think about it from a marketing perspective. If I dial in my cost per lead, now it really just becomes a dial of how much cash flow can I spend and allocate towards marketing. If I need to ramp up lead generation, if I know my cost per lead and I want to go double my leads, in theory, I understand it's not this black and white, but in theory, I just mess with that amount that I spend. And if my cost per lead stays roughly the same, I'm going to generate more leads. Same thing on any side of it, having that delayed gratification can certainly play a huge part in long-term success of the business. And then, we say it a lot, and I think it can't be overstated, which is making sure we use the cash flow from this business to think like an investor, right? And yeah, internally we want to think like an investor, but we also want to make sure that any cash flow that the business does generate, we pull that out and invest it in something that is going to have that long-term wealth creation, whether that be, index funds or real estate or, another business, whatever it may be. We want to make sure we're putting that money to work and not just letting it sit there because, you know, um, I never really understood this statement until it actually happened to me, which is the bigger a business gets, the hungrier it gets and the more it eats. And, all of a sudden you wake up and you're have this bigger business, right? Bigger in the sense of top line, but you're personally not benefiting anymore from it if you're not careful. And so making sure that you are, taking that profit, running that profit first system, taking it out, thinking like an investor and putting it to work elsewhere so that the business doesn't eat it.
Yeah. No, great insight. So just a few things that I think that we found are kind of points of differentiation between so many of the businesses in our industry that get by. They do okay. I mean, we're not really talking about businesses that are on the brink of bankruptcy or anything, but they haven't turned the corner. They're not building wealth. They aren't stable and durable, and the owner probably still feels a little overworked and underpaid. Well, if you want to kind of escape that trap, then think about some of the things that we just touched on. And I think that the more you focus on them, the better your business will be. We'll see you next episode.